Welcome to In Real Time, where we as Heights Church are inviting you in for real conversations about leading people, organizations, and change in the new normal. We're hoping that our real discussions about our church's journey will help you as you reimagine and rebuild yours. Craig Sweeney here, and welcome to In Real Time, where we're having real conversations about leading people, organizations, and change. And I've got two co-hosts with me. Why don't you introduce yourselves before we get into our topic today?
So I am Pastor Jen. I help out with our restoration ministries and in our office, so help behind the scenes with a lot of the administration stuff.
Nice. I see that you are wearing a 49ers ring. You just added that. You slipped that on just right before we hit record.
Yes, I did.
And that is really that's
Nice.
bad form.
Distracting.
Bad form.
Distracting for you.
Bad form. Okay.
But the Cowboys did well. My name is Justin. I
Yes.
am the Life Groups pastor. I also oversee hospitality and our young adults ministry here at Heights Church.
Sweet.
Yeah.
That's sweet. I'm going to be completely distracted by that ring. Anyway, we're moving on. Our topic
Victory is
today.
hers. Yes.
And we've been asked to actually give our thoughts about this. It's definitely something that we have some experience with, navigating responsibilities and expectations from my boss. That's how it was given to us. And so this is a great topic, one I know I have dealt with all of my ministry career and seen it from a number of different angles. And today we want to be able to talk about that from a senior lead perspective and a staff lead, our staff's perspective, just try to get a 360 view of this, because I know this is an area that is frustrating to people, and they don't often know how to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I know that from experience and speaking with many church leaders about this actual topic. And so I just want to say right off the bat that I think a really good goal when it comes to this idea of navigating the responsibilities and expectations of what we do is that there really shouldn't be any surprises. I mean, when you are on a staff team, you should not be surprised by what you're being held responsible for and the expectations that are on you. I mean, that would be the goal. And I realize it may not be 100% because there are things that change often, but hopefully that expectation is introduced before we're held accountable to it. And I do find, and I know I've been in the position where that order got reversed, where I'm held accountable to something that I didn't even know I was responsible for.
Wait, that was my job? I didn't realize that. Like,
when did that
I don't know anybody
happen?
said anything about that.
Yeah.
When did that happen? Yeah.
So anyway, so no surprises.
Yeah,
so
it's fair.
This is going to be a part 1 and part 2. Today, we're going to be talking, obviously, about part 2. We'll tell you what our part 1. Part 2 is going to be when it doesn't go so well. How do you have that conversation
That's gonna be good.
when things are not very clear? So that's going to be next time. But for this time, let's take a look at there's 2 parts to this. Number 1 is, are you clear about your responsibilities and expectations? Are you clear? Do you think most people on staffs, and I'm not even talking churches, I just mean in general as employees, do we think most people are actually like crystal clear about their jobs?
I don't think so.
I'd say no.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking about, I've been here from the beginning too, and why didn't we? For so many years, we didn't have that as clear as we do now.
True. So you're trying to say
honestly,
that I failed in making things crystal clear.
No, what I'm saying is that I just
That's what I heard.
feel like one of the reasons was because we didn't have bandwidth.
Yeah.
And we didn't realize that it was making that big of an impact on our team.
No, you're right. It's true. And
So
we
we were doing
weren't.
so many other things.
Right.
And then we started to realize, oh, wait a second. We
need to bring clarity.
to be more intentional about this. We need
Yeah.
to bring clarity. Our staff needs it.
Yeah.
I need it.
Yeah. You know, as you say that, something that actually happened comes to mind There's a reason why this happens. And this is an honest reason for how people wind up unclear. Because if you think about it, when it was just you, when we planted this church 14 years ago, it was me, it was Pastor John, and it was you. And I remember our staff meeting was the three of us sitting in a chair, we're staring at each other. Like,
Saying,
what do we do?
Help me, Jesus.
Here was the reality. All three of us were generalists. We weren't specialists at the time.
We were doing everything.
We were doing everything.
That needed to be done.
Yeah. One week you'd do it. Next week I'd do it. Next week John's doing it. Next week the two of you were doing
Get her done
whatever that responsibility was.
Yes.
But as time goes on and the organization grew complex,
Yes.
we needed to become more and more specialists.
Exactly.
And so now our job descriptions really do reflect being
much
specialists.
Yes.
So we do have to realize that the size of our churches or organizations will mean that we are either going to be more of a generalist, which is not a bad thing, but we need to know that.
Yes.
We need to be clear about it. Or we may be specialists because we have a very narrow area, but that's all the time we have for. And so that's about the clarity we kind of need.
Yes.
Yeah. So we realized that we needed to keep having conversations every 6 to 12 months because things were changing that quickly. That's really good. That's really good. We do know that in business, and I know in churches, that statistically, most staff employees do not actually even have a job description. They were hired, but they don't actually have a job description.
Do you got one, Justin?
I do now.
Yeah.
I've had one for a while.
Yeah, my son was hired at a job a couple months ago, and he's never seen a job description.
That's wild.
Yeah.
I always I think back when you're talking like corporate world and stuff like that, you know, in management, when you're brought into the role, here's your job duties, here's your job description. I remember explaining it to servers I was training. Here's the job description. Here's what we have to do. Here's our role in all of this. And so it's interesting because some of my world, it was really spelled out. This is your job.
Yeah.
And other places. So I was really clear for a long time.
That's good. Yeah.
You came here.
Yeah. And then it got really gray and muddy for a while.
What?
No, but it's true.
that's the ugly side. Of course.
Is.
Yeah. We don't do this perfectly. We haven't always.
Well,
Not
and
at
if
all.
you've gone from a
We still
corporate
don't.
structure and like, I was in restaurants. And so, you know, you get feedback pretty quick. And so one of the challenges of shifting to, you know, the church world is where do you get feedback? And is it as quick? And so how do you know if you're doing a good job? And so that was kind of a big, and how do you ever finish projects? Like, or are they just kind of hanging out there in the ether for a bit? You know what I mean?
And pick it up again the next day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's just it's a very different world when it comes to clarity versus what is gray in the midst of this.
So are you clear about your responsibilities and expectations? That is a question everybody needs to be able to answer, and hopefully the answer is yes. But one of the things I would just say right off the bat is, do you have a job description? That is the first question every employee, staff person should have, but even senior leads. I have a job description, and I need to be clear about that. And, you know, I'm not always actually clear about it. It does change. And I think that's okay. I think that's another piece, is that we somehow have this expectation that they won't change, but they will. And hopefully they will, because it reflects that we're growing as an organization, and also that we're growing as leaders. And we can take on more responsibility, or we do become more specialists and expert at the areas we dive into. And that's a good thing. And so I shouldn't be upset about it. I should be excited about it, because it reflects good things.
Yeah.
Well, it can, I should say, in a healthy environment.
That's true.
That's good. That's good.
Very
Justin, you had something to say about job descriptions.
Well, it's kind of funny. Before my job description became really clear, right? When it was really spelled out for me. In fact, I had to write it. Like, that was, what do you do here? Is literally the question.
Okay, but that was by design.
It was, and it was
wanted you
because I was working for the executive, your executive,
executive pastor.
Executive pastor Cheryl Bangs was my boss, and so my job was to take as much off her plate as I could to lighten her load, so she could lighten yours.
Yep.
And so I did a lot of different things. It was very fluid for a long time, and I was okay with that.
Well, we joked your job was to free her up to do her job.
Well, and
so whatever that is,
right? And I'm totally okay with that. And so as we wrote it out, she's like, okay, but here's what I was thinking about this. I was very clear on what I had to do because I was always going to her. Okay, what's my 20%? What's the piece that I can't shuffle off to somebody else?
Yeah.
What do you need me to do?
Yeah.
And she would rattle a list. I need this, 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 and this. Everything else, I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So I knew very clearly, even though it may or may not have been spelled out on paper, what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
So I was clear on that stuff.
That's good. That's good.
But we're talking really about reviews. Is that the question that you were asking?
Well, no, I think actually, but over this last year, just in regards to the job descriptions, so Pastor Cheryl has stepped out. She's retired.
She did.
She still likes us. We still like her.
Oh, she's awesome.
It's all wonderful, but it was time for her to retire, not because we wanted it. She wanted it.
Yeah.
It was time. It's the season. But as she steps out, then obviously those responsibilities, since we're not going to be rehiring an executive pastor, we have an executive team. Then those responsibilities are now being shared. That changed your job description.
It totally did.
You took a number of things from her.
Yeah, membership, baptisms, all those things that she would coordinate, facilitate, all that. Yeah, the training of all that kind of shifted to my plate. Yeah. But again, it was because I was already in partnership with her.
Right.
I already knew what was going on. So it just, it was a logical shuffle.
Right. And it is the process of you growing.
Absolutely.
You and your influence here as a leader growing. Yeah. All of that was on purpose. So yeah, it's a good reflection for sure.
We didn't do this before, but we do it now.
Absolutely.
Where we do review those once a year and update them. So that's like, yay!
Yeah, before that it was every few years we'd probably look at it, but now it's very intentional.
Yeah, and it's always with our annual review, so it goes simultaneously with that and we don't miss it. It's been very helpful. Yeah. It's a good way just to keep it on your radar.
Yeah, and it needs to be a part of that review process because this is what we said you came here to do. So if I'm not reviewing, if you're hitting the mark, then that doesn't make a lot of sense on the review. What are you using for the review? So we use the job descriptions and also then our game plan.
Yep.
Which if you're not sure what a game plan is, we talked about that in earlier episodes. We don't have time to get into it now, but it talks about core values and how we behave as a staff team. So all those things are a part of our review. Yeah, the job description is super huge. You got to have it.
Oh,
otherwise, what in the world are we talking about?
Yeah, it becomes very gray, and people are wondering, is this my job?
Yeah.
Or you get this pushback. That's not my job.
Yeah.
Right? And nobody, I mean, let's be honest. I don't want to work with the person who's pushing like that. That's not my job. I don't have to deal with that.
Yeah.
Like that speaks of, I'm not necessarily a team player.
Yeah.
I'm not your partner in this. I don't have your back in this. Like, and don't get me wrong. It's not their job, but sometimes I need to lean into places that aren't my job.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's just good old fashioned partnership and learning how to navigate us as a team. And sometimes you just need to step in things that there are needs.
You do.
So, yeah.
So let me ask this, and I ask this because I think that it's good for our listeners to consider this. What are the negative implications of you not having a job description that you know is up to date and that you can look at and say, okay, I'm clear about what I'm here to do? What's the implications of not having that?
I think for me, I want to know how I'm doing. So to get feedback like that helps me know I'm on track.
And the job description, just looking and reading it gives you feedback in itself.
Yeah, because it's got it clearly laid out for me. So I know exactly what I need to do to hit the mark. I know what's expected of me.
Yeah.
And to have that clearly defined is, for me, I'm a bit of an operator processor. That just gets me on the tracks. And now I'm going.
Yeah.
And that's all I need.
That's good. Love that. I think too, one thing about it, you guys had asked me earlier about, what's the value of a job description to me? And it's important to me because mine changes as well. And what I've noticed is that it actually helps me recognize change happened. Because now either that thing that was really important before, it's becoming less important, but there's something else that I need to put on this responsibility that has started to become much more urgent and more of that top 20%
Yes, that's so
impact
good. I
for
was just
me.
thinking of that.
And I need to either say no to this thing that was on the list, or I need to now hand that to somebody else. And that's been a process, as we talked about earlier, the generalist to the specialist. Well, I was a generalist too when we started, and now I'm doing everything I can to just get down to a handful of things so that I can do only those things that only I can do.
Yeah.
So then everything else can be handed off, and then we can, as a team, all hopefully get to that place where I'm doing the things only I can do and do them really, really well. You never get rid of everything.
Yeah.
But it's a good goal to have. So the value of that is really, really
that
huge.
clarity is
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
big.
It's a big deal.
How do you know if your job description is up to date?
You got to read it.
You got to read it. Okay. Yeah.
Well, and I think sometimes you have to sit down with your boss and go, okay, is there anything that I'm missing on here? Or is there, like, I think during the review process, there's the questions of the give and take of, is this still current?
Yeah.
Do we need to add anything to this? Do we need to shift anything from this? Or did we shuffle a duty to somewhere else?
Yeah.
Recently, this past year, I took on the leadership for the young adults. That's now on my job description. That's something that I do, and so it's funny because it's really specialized for the person too, specifically. Like, this is my job. These are the things that I'm responsible for.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when we think job description, you think, okay, general. Here's the title. Here's the things that fall underneath it. But there are some more specific things for individuals that I oversee that aren't necessarily under the life group's pastor
True.
title.
If we were to rehire your position, which of course we're not going to do that, if we did, that next person is not going to have young adults underneath them.
Because
unless that's
exactly
something on
But on my job description, it's a piece of the puzzle.
Right.
And so I think having clarity on those things is super important.
Yeah.
Because if I don't know, and I think the consequence of me not knowing is there's the possibility of getting called out. Hey, you're not doing X, Y, and Z. I didn't even realize X, Y, and Z was part of my job.
Yeah.
Which that's just nightmarish. I mean, working in that kind of a world where you don't know if you're supposed to be doing it or if it's that's horrible.
Yeah.
That is a level of unclear I'd never want to be a part of.
Yeah.
If I can help it.
Yeah. If you can help it at all. No, that's good. That's good. Okay. All right. So the second part of this, navigating responsibilities and expectations of your boss or supervisor. The second thing would be, are these expectations and responsibilities realistic? That's another good question. Now, hopefully, when you came on, this was realistic. You accepted it. You said, "Yo, yeah, that's what I came here to do. I want this." And so I think the question is going to be yes or no. Is it realistic? But I think as we're wrapping up today, the question really comes down to, we're not going to dive into the question of what to do when it's not clear.
Right.
But I do think as we're wrapping up this conversation, we can ask the question, what if they're not realistic? How do we put our head around that? Because often it can be something that makes us angry, resentful. The implications of that are not good.
No.
And it undermines trust on the team. It's just a breakdown of things. And I think it's important that if you are finding that the responsibilities and expectations that are on you are not realistic, I think there's some things to recognize. This is really important from a senior leader perspective, but also from staff. And I want you guys to speak to this. But the tensions, I hope that we're recognizing in a healthy environment, are going to be, I want what's healthy from my staff, but I also want to make sure that we recognize there are necessary sacrifices and we all have to make them.
Right.
It's just part of it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to work 80 hours a week every week, but there are some times I've got to put a good amount of hours in.
Yeah.
It just is part of the job. And so there are sacrifices that need to be made during seasons or for an event or a project. I totally get that. And so, but overall, you want the environment to be healthy. And so I think the tensions of these responsibilities and expectations. From my vantage point as a senior leader, I want to make sure that my staff knows I do recognize there's a tension of what's healthy in your life, but also what I'm asking you to do is part of the necessary sacrifices that we go through as the calling of ministry. And hopefully we're navigating those two tensions well.
Yeah. It's getting to the healthy balance.
Getting to the healthy balance, and there's not a real formula necessarily for it. It's more of a discernment.
Yes.
With
And
people
only
you trust.
you individually know that for yourself personally, I think.
Yeah.
But that's when you got to have a conversation with your supervisor.
Yeah.
And that's where you figure it out.
Yeah.
Is it unrealistic?
Yeah.
Is it a bandwidth issue?
Right.
Is it a skill set issue? Or just not fitting my wiring and my personality? I mean, I'm going to have to do it if there's nobody else that can do it, but maybe that then becomes part of the 80% where I bring someone onto my team
Yeah. That can do that.
better at it than me.
Yeah.
And I can
Right.
delegate to them, but
Yeah.
it's a tension. It's there. You just got to manage it.
It is. It's a real tension.
I think there's another piece of that tension, Jen, that you didn't
What?
touch on, is that I have to ask myself the question, am I leaning into this weird travel when it comes to the sacrifice piece? Am I leaning into what social media tells me? You're like, and all these leaders who are, I only work 10 hours a week and I'm a high capacity leader. And you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Am I leaning into the fantasy world of what work world looks like? Or am I leaning into the reality of what it actually is?
Yeah.
Because sometimes we buy into the vacation life versus ministry. I only need to work 20 hours a week or whatever that job is. I just think sometimes people are leaning into that lie, and I have to ask the question. I have to check myself. Wait a minute. Is my expectation based on something over here that's just not real? Or am I grounded in what's actually necessary to accomplish this job in a healthy manner and to fulfill my calling? Because it's not just, that's the thing about working for Jesus. This isn't just a job.
Yeah.
It's a calling.
It's a calling.
And and if it's just a job, man, bro, get out. I love you. Get out. Like, don't do this.
You're not going to last.
Yeah, you won't last here because this is a calling. We all trust one another in that way.
Yeah.
Well, and
we do.
I mean, we're talking to leaders out there, and my hope is for them is that if they're feeling that they're so burned out because of these unrealistic expectations, maybe it's time to shift into something that's better for you, or maybe it's time for God to stretch your capacity, because capacity is a thing. So.
Capacity is a thing. That's
discernment.
a whole nother episode.
We'll talk about that.
Write that down.
Capacity,
Take note of that.
growing capacity. It can be done, and it is done.
So can we ask you a
it's
question?
good.
What do you need to see from your team to know that we are moving in the right direction and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, honestly, what I think senior leaders, I'll preface it with healthy senior leaders.
Okay.
I think what a healthy senior leader needs to see in a teammate that's having the conversation about, I don't think this expectation or responsibility is realistic. What I'm looking for is that conversation to happen from somebody who has a willing heart, who I know wants to achieve. They're not just looking for an easy ride.
Right.
This is hard. We're battling. We use that term for a reason. We're battling.
Yeah.
And if people don't understand they're in a battle, then that's kind of a frustrating place to be. I want to know that they're in the battle and they're telling me, as somebody who's battling and next to me, that they get it. And they still think this is not a fair expectation or responsibility. So I want to see a teammate. I want to see a willing heart. And if I see that, I know that's sincere. Man, that goes a long way with me. Now I can have an honest conversation. I'm not thinking in the back of my mind, they just don't want to sacrifice. They're just not willing to make the sacrifices that this calling requires. And I don't mean sacrifice your family.
Right.
I just mean even the short-term sacrifices that are necessary, and I would say are healthy for ministry leaders.
Well, I would say that I think unhealthy senior leaders who say they're not just willing to make the sacrifice, there's a place where they may need to go, okay, am I being realistic in that?
Yeah.
Because, or
Right.
am I being so unrealistic? Because they may be asking them to sacrifice their family. No, you need to work the 70, 80 hours. You need to be here on call 24/7. You need to be,
Yeah.
you can't turn your phone off. You can't go on vacations without being tethered to
Yeah.
this community. That's not healthy.
No.
And
it's
it
not.
doesn't allow for rest and rejuvenation and recharge. And so I think it's important for those folks to hear that, hey, maybe the sacrifice, they may think that sacrifice is unrealistic.
Yeah.
Maybe they need to evaluate if it really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah, that's good. What does staff need to hear from senior leaders when they're having this conversation? This is important for us as senior leaders to really know, because it's a vulnerable moment.
Jen, you want to tackle that first piece? Because I think
It's a vulnerable
super
moment
important.
to actually
You're
be a
really good at
senior
that
leader
one.
to talk about that.
Well, just understanding the why is huge. I mean, this comes up so many times.
All the time.
And not just in this area. It's surprising how important it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just part of our wiring. It just is what gets us going and causes a passion to kind of drive us if we really understand the why. And at least in this environment, we always come back to, this is kingdom work.
Yeah.
This is kingdom work. Jesus is first. We're doing whatever we can here at Heights Church to follow his lead, which you do such a good job at as the lead. It's
Thank you. You get it.
always sweet. But that's huge, because then I know what's expected. I know what my responsibilities are, but I also know why it's important to you, and in a way why it should be important to me too. I mean, I know that as an individual that I'm here because I'm following God's call, but to know that that's your heart and the things that God is calling you to as the lead are lining up with God's calling on my life.
Yeah, that's good.
That is huge.
Yeah.
Those two have to line up, honestly, for me.
Yeah.
So when that gets clarified, I know I'm in the right spot.
Yeah. That's good.
Well, I also think it's important to us, to staff. We need to know that we're valued, that we matter.
Yeah.
That we're not just cogs in a system or a machine, right? Like I need to know that my little cog matters. Like I need to know that I'm important and appreciated.
Yeah.
I do. I like the attaboys, and that, man, you attaboy me, I'm in. Like seriously, I'm a words of affirmation guy. So when I get them, I'm like, what else do you need? Like seriously, it's how I'm wired. So also
I
really
like your watch, Justin.
really, thank you. Really clear expectations. Like I need it's really nice when I know what you need from me, what's expected of me.
Yeah.
Hey, we need you at 5:30. Like those kinds of, even the little details of, hey, everybody needs to be here at this time for this event.
Yeah.
I appreciate that stuff because, I need to be there at this time for this event. I'm not confused or gray of going, Did Craig say what time he wants us here? Because I don't remember. Like,
Yeah, and I think it's right that you guys ask the questions, because sometimes I haven't communicated it or whatever. I don't mind that you ask the questions. I'm glad you do. It shows me that you're wanting to hit the mark.
yeah,
That's important.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, I think as we're talking about navigating responsibilities and expectations from our bosses, these two things are really, really super important. Are we clear?
Yes.
And we know that a lot of people are not. And so we want to get to clarity. And are these expectations and responsibilities actually realistic? That's an important question. And if not, then being able to sit down and get into that conversation with your supervisor or senior leader so that you can get to that. Next time, we're going to get into the whole topic of what to do when it's not clear and you're feeling really vulnerable about this whole thing.
Yeah.
And you need a little extra help. So we want to get into some how-tos on that. That's going to be really important. So thanks for joining me today for a real conversation
Glad to be
about
here.
navigating what can be a difficult relationship
Yeah.
and conversation. So thanks for having a real conversation about leading people, organization, and change. And please hit like and subscribe and the bell notification so you will not miss one episode as it drops. We will see you next time in real time.